Hey guys, welcome back to more AFK Arena. This video is going to be an answer to something I've seen in the comments a fair bit, and that is early game teams. I feel like there is a lot more new players in the game. I have done one of these a while back, but I wanted to do an update on the sort of early game team cores that you can use, and then sort of some filler spots in those teams. So let's get into it. Okay, so first off, I want to mention a few heroes in case you have them, and one that's going to be very good for the early stage of the game. So everyone gets a free copy of Wukong when they start on a fresh server. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure you can get him like after you clear chapter 1 or whatever it is. So you get him very early. He's an absolute beast of a carry up to level 100. And he's absolutely savage, so definitely worth using up to about a level 100. Then he does get outranked because he stays at elite. You can't level him up further, and he does drop off a fair bit. If you get lucky and summon a couple copies, could be an option to keep going with him. I have seen some people get him from the Labyrinth, but we'll talk a bit more about the Labyrinth in a minute. So Wukong, amazing carry for the early game. Then, and pretty much when you've got him in the before level 100, you're pretty much just going to be trying to make a faction bonus and have a sort of balanced team, because you're not going to have a lot of heroes by that stage. So it's just making do with what you have. But Wukong, fantastic carry in those early stages. Two other heroes I wanted to mention, Talene and Mihira. If you get lucky and pull a copy of either of these two, these are both very strong heroes to use in the early game. Talene can be used at elite, even like into the mid game, chapter 20s and stuff like that. I still use her on my account in chapter whatever I'm in now, 2152. She still becomes useful in some stages. So Talene, always good. Mihira, very similar. She has multiple lives with her passive, and she can mind control the whole enemy team. Also, she gives your front row extra haste and all that good stuff. So two very strong heroes that are hard to get, but if you do pull a copy of them, they're going to be absolutely fantastic for your account. Now I want to talk about your main carry hero. So your main carry hero is going to be the one that you're going to level above everything else, hopefully have them higher ascended and all that stuff, to basically carry your team like it states. Now your carry hero is something that you're normally going to put in the front row because they're going to be leveled higher, so they're going to have higher stats. For me on this account, I have Shamira. Now, Shamira is fantastic early game, but not so good late game. So you're going to be building her specifically for this early game phase. However, due to the amount of dimensionals that come into the game, she's going to be useful later game because you can link her to a dimensional. Now, about this Shamira. Now, the reason I always suggested Shamira in the past was because you could get her from the Labyrinth store, meaning you could reliably get copies of her to have her at a high ascension. However, due to the game lately, with the amount of dimensionals that come into the game, and with these dimensionals, you always want to pick them up, even if you're free to play, they do cost a hell of a lot of the Labyrinth coins, which becomes an issue because then you can't buy your copies of Shamira early on to have her as a reliable carry. So for your carry, there's many heroes that you can use as a carry, but it just comes down to the RNG. So it comes down to picking a wish list that has some carry heroes on it, and then hopefully getting some RNG. One that I'm not a massive fan of, but you do get 3 guaranteed copies of her throughout the time. You get an Elite Plus copy after 7 days login of Belinda, and then you also do get another copy from clearing, I think like chapter 9 or something like that. So it puts you well on your way to getting a mythic Belinda, so she can be an option if you have no others. As we move on down the list, the light bearers, I don't really fancy many others. Oscar can be a decent early game carry, but he really falls off later, so I try not to go there. We do have, as we scroll down over here in the Wilders, Iron is one of my favorite ones. He's really strong in the early game, and he's fantastic in the late game. So if you get lucky and get the copies of him, and definitely have him on your wish list, you can definitely use him as a carry. He's absolutely savage. Another one, Soros, the boss battle king, but he can actually be a decent carry in general progression as well. Struggles a little bit against high CC enemy teams, but he's a hero you're going to want to build anyway for boss battles. So if you get the copies of him, you can have him as a carry. Something like Solace, I've seen some people use nicely. However, Solace doesn't get a spot on my Wilder wish list, which we'll look at when we look at the Wilder team we're going to use later on. And then basically another one is going to be Stitchy or Damon. Very, very strong throughout the whole game. One that's definitely worthwhile investing in. He's an absolute savage. Incredibly strong, and in the very early game you can even get away with an Aioli. However, he runs into a weird period in the middle of the game where his damage doesn't quite catch up until you get him ascended and get some furniture on him. But definitely for me, Soros, Damon, and Iron are going to be the top picks as your carry hero if you get lucky on the RNG of summoning them. As we move on from that, we do have a couple options down here up until level 160 that you can use as a carry, because these guys you will reliably be able to ascend. And we do have Muriel. However, Muriel you're going to want to normally put in the back row, even though I spoke about normally putting these guys in the front. Her optimal place is back mid, which allows her ultimate, her big phoenix, to deal maximum damage to everyone. However, I have used her as a carry once, and I have had her in the front row, and it worked okay. And then we have Savius. Savius is single target damage, but he has a hell of a lot of damage on that single target attack and a lot of self-sustain, so he can be used. Those guys are level capped at 160, but very easy to get to Legendary Plus in the early game, so can function as decent carry heroes. And then, like I said, Chimera, obviously, if you get the copies of her, she's a really strong carry as well. And the one that, like I said, I used to always suggest Chimera. However, due to the fact of all the dimensionals and the lack of resources in the game for getting the heroes from the labyrinth, she's sort of, if you get the copies you can use her. If you don't, try and pick, like I said, one of those other heroes as a carry. Having said that, just about any damage dealer can be used as a carry. Those are just my top options. For instance, I know I've used I've used Titus before he got out leveled and I didn't have the copies to ascend him. And Tandra, if we go over here, I don't know if I have one. And Tandra can be really decent in the early game, however does fall off a bit in the late game. But like I said, as long as you're not investing into the signature item of these heroes, they still have a great use in the late game due to dimensionals needing to link to a hero, so you can still get functionality out of them later. So if you get the copies early on something that you want to use as a carry, go ahead and do it. Now we'll look at some team formations. Okay, so the first team core I want to look at is going to be the Lucius Rowan core. Now for this to work, Lucius is going to have to be at decent ascension. Obviously at the start of the game he can be at elite, but as you progress you want him to be at a decent level of ascension compared to the rest of your team. For instance, if you have a bunch of legendary plus heroes and Lucius is elite, he's probably not going to cut it because he is going to be that tank. So that's the one thing to consider in this. So you have Lucius and Rowan. That's a two-piece light bearer bonus, and you can fill in a last slot wherever you want. So one thing about Rowan that I want to mention is that Rowan in late game is often seen in the front row. In early game, put him in the back mid is going to be the best place for him. Unless you have something else that really wants the back mid, you can try him in front row, but he's more often than not just going to instantly die, just due to not being tanky enough. But back mid is the place for him. It allows his potions to heal everyone on the team. If I have him here, then position 3 up the top there will not be healed by Rowan's potions. But like I said, in the late game, he's very fantastic front row. Early game, because he's at a lower level, he's going to struggle there. But Rowan Lucius, very solid core. Another support that's a light bearer that you can put in there to get a faction bonus is going to be Rosaline, and that's going to be pretty solid for that one. You don't have to use her if you have a Taylene. I feel like Taylene synergizes really well into this team. And then for the remaining 2 spots on the team, it's going to be whatever you have. So just for instance though, I want to show you in case you do have a Taylene. So the number 2 spot, so when you are building these teams, you're going to want a tank in your front row spot, and the other front row spot is typically going to be your carry hero, no matter who they are, due to the fact that your carry hero is normally going to be tankier than the rest because you level them faster than the rest. For instance, on my account here, you can see that my Chimera is 220 and the rest of my team is 200. So she's going to get that front row spot due to raw stats that she gains from being level 220. Now, if I have a Taylene in my team, normally I'm going to be doing it like this, where I have Lucius or my other tank behind Taylene, so that Taylene can take the first couple hits, help heal up my Chimera in the early parts of the battle, and then Lucius is going to come up behind and then start defending once Talene dies because she resurrects and all that good stuff. That's just the strategy I normally use for it. But basically, this sort of team here, you've got the Lightbearer core. If you have a Talene, obviously Celestials are going to count for any faction. That will give you a faction bonus. However, like I said, Rosaline is actually really nice in this sort of team core, buffing your main damage dealer, which for me is going to be my Chimera, letting her ult more often, and also just Rosaline's just really nice in the super early game as well. Double ults are just really going to help you out. And then as we move on from that, this last spot can fall to any hero that you want to put in your team. Normally a support, some CC would be nice. We can go through, you can put basically a hero from any of the following formations that we go through: a Tassie, a Leica, Pharrell, anything with some CC or something to buff your team is going to be fine in that position. Okay, so the next team formation is one that's been around since the very start of the game, and that is going to be the Wilder core. Now, this one gets even more powerful if you do have that Euron or Saurus as your carry hero, because you're going to get an extended faction bonus. So the way this one works, it's going to be basically these heroes here are going to be the main ones. Pippa can actually get slotted in here as well, except I'm not a massive fan of Pippa in the early game, and if you use her, she will have to be in the middle. But it's basically a combination of any 3 of these 5 heroes that can be used, and they're a really solid support core. And what you're going to want to do is have them in the back row. Tassie can sometimes work in the front row due to her teleport ability. She can take a hit, teleport away, and then you can keep going from there. So definitely an option, but in general, you're going to be looking at this as a back row team. And the basic formation you're going to be looking at is something like this, with Tassie, Leica, and Arden in the early game. Arden very interchangeable with Namora. And then also, if you don't think you need the haste, you can interchange that with that, and you can be pretty good. Like I said, Pippa's an option there too if you do have her, except I'm not a massive fan of Pippa in the early game. I find that she shines more in the late game. But my main option that I go with is going to be this core here, and then eventually sometimes swapping for this core here, because sometimes the Namora, for instance, in this stage, being able to mind control that Savies is going to be very, very strong, being able to deal some damage to the enemy team as well, plus the heals come in handy. Now, for the rest of this team, the last 2 spots are going to be for a tank and a main damage dealer. Very, very simple. So Euron, if he's your main damage dealer, is going to be very strong. For me on this account, it would be Chimera. And this is a team that even with these guys at elite, that's the other cool thing about this team, is that the Tassie, all these Wilders that you have in the back row, like even into stage 21, they can be at elite and still be effective, provided the enemy team doesn't have anything like a Kassos that's going to throw axes and reach the back row. As long as your back row is protected by your front row, these guys can work at elite pretty fine and still get the job done. So in my team, it would be Chimera, and then the other one is going to be your tank, which hopefully if you have the copies of Lucius, you can do a Lucius. And this is going to be the easiest core for people to build, because if you don't have a Lucius, you can always use something like a Brutus. And the cool thing about Brutus is he has the passive invincibility, which means even if you have him in a low ascension, it's still going to be viable. But you can also use any other tank that you have at a decent ascension in this spot, and that's going to be a very stable team core. So this is my favorite team core for most free-to-play players, especially because, like I said, it's so easy to build. You can use the Arden in this, which is a free-to-play hero, and then, like I said, it's just a matter of putting a carry and a tank. Brutus is an option that you can use at low ascension. Hopefully you get some copies of Lucius and stuff like that to be able to buff you in the early game. But literally that's it. Wilders in the back row, carry and tank in the front row, and you're set to go. Now, the last team core that I'm going to look at is going to be the Graveborn team core, and this one is heavily untested because Silas only just came to the game. But this is one that I really do like the look of, and the core is going to be between these units here. So once again, similarly, these guys can all be used at low ascension, so some decent use. Nara sometimes needs to have more ascension because she can get deleted by the enemy that she grabs, but these guys are going to be the ones. So Basically, this is what I would be looking at in a general play sense. Odin, very powerful in the early game, even at low ascension. He portals enemies, he can reset energy and stuff like that. Silas does fall off without ascensions just because his heals are based on his attack and stuff like that, but nonetheless a very, very strong hero in the Graveborn arsenal. When he does ult on someone, he's going to make them invincible, increase their attack. Really, really strong effects that can be done here. He's nice to have in the middle for his gas clouds, but sometimes you may want to put him behind your main carry to protect him a little bit more, and mean that, like, if you get to the end of the game and it's only your main carry, for instance my Chimera and him, if they're the only two left, anytime he ults, he's going to use it on the Chimera, which is your main carry damage dealer, making them invincible and giving them an attack increase. So very, very strong there. Pharrell, very usable at low ascension. The thing about Pharrell is he does get a lot of good effects on his abilities from skill ups, which basically just come with the levels. So the higher level you get, the better Pharrell will be, but nonetheless his fears are very fantastic. Also, just getting his signature item unlocked on this by getting him to mythic will be huge, but once again can still be used at elite once you get some decent levels into him. Now the other tech option for this core is going to be the Nara. Like I said, she can grab an enemy and lock them out. However, as you go forward at low ascension, some enemies that she grabs will sneak an attack in between her grabbing them and knocking their legs out. So sometimes she can be poor, but still a very strong hero in the early game. But I just really like Odin, especially in that very early phase. If you pull an early Odin with the Wukong, you stack the enemies where that Wukong is. Once the Wukong uses his ult, all the monkeys drop their AoE in the same area and destroy everyone. So that is going to be that team core that I really do like for Graveborn. Once again, untested because Silas did just come into the game, but it just in theory has a great play in my opinion. And then, like I said, the last two spots, like the previous team, it's just going to be Chimera plus a tank. Hopefully you have Lucius. If not, you can try anything else. Obviously this one's going to work really well with a Chimera or a Stitchy as your main carry, because you're going to get that extra faction bonus. But like I said, any carry damage dealer plus a tank is going to make this team really solid. Now I wanted to go into a couple of special mentions. We did do a Lightbearer, a Graveborn, and a Wilder team core. However, I just wanted to do a special mention of the Totem dude. He has got buffed recently. I actually do like him in the early game if I have a copy and I'm struggling for heals and stuff like that. His heals are decent now. His totems are very distracting, so he can actually be a decent unit to slot into a team. However, you're not going to build a team around him. The fact that you're going to lose out on faction bonuses when you use him does kind of suck, but just a healer that can be very decent, especially in the really early game. He's going to be nice. However, if you decide to go with something like a Savius as your carry and then a Brutus as a tank, you can use that as a bit of a team core. However, I'm not a huge fan of this, but definitely something to consider. Another one that's not too bad, I do enjoy a little bit, is Anarchy. He can be teched into teams, and when I talk about having a tank, having your main carry and a tank in that last spot, he's another one that can be very strong. He does provide a shield at the start of the battle for your whole team, which can help mitigate some of that early damage and help you along the way. But there are a lot of other heroes. Just keep an eye out for what you do get the copies of, and some things might be just worthwhile ascending because you get the copies. Like I said, worst case, if you build a hero to Ascended and they're not that great in the late game, you can still link them to dimensionals. Just be more careful about where you spend on signature items, and that's pretty much all there is to it. I hope that helps the new players along their way. If you're an experienced player and you have some more early game team cores that you use, leave them in the comments. But that is going to be it for this one, guys. Thanks for watching. I hope you have an awesome day, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Cheers.